As many of you know, Xilonen is the biggest shakeup we've had to the meta in Genshin Impact in quite a while. So today, we're going to go through my entire tier list and talk about how she affects it. We're going to go through every single placement change and why, and you might be pretty surprised with some of the new placements. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. To keep things short, I'm going to start with my original tier list in its exact placements as before. I'm not going to rehash why anyone is there, and if my assumptions become relevant, we'll talk about it throughout the list. But if you want to know the full backstory of everything, I'm going to link my original tier list at the end. And this final list will also be available on Tactor. And by commenting, you are automatically entered into a free draw for a brand new 5-star character, 100% guaranteed. So make sure to go comment on the Tactor tier list for your chance to get that. So starting with, let's rank all the new characters that have come out since my last tier list. The first one is Emily, and I think Emily has proven to be an extremely strong character. She has just frankly absurd off-field damage. It shocks me how powerful she is just with the raw damage she can do. And there's a number of teams, being Arlecchino, Kinich, sort of mono pyro teams in general. She's often the best. Mualani teams, she's one of the better options. I wouldn't say, she's definitely not ubiquitous enough to go in tier 0. But she's definitely a tier 1 character in my opinion, because even if she's not best in slot on a team, as long as you can proc burning, as long as you have basically any sort of pyro application, she's going to be an extremely strong character. So, and being an off-fielder, to me, that just raises her value. Like Raiden Emily is something that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. Raiden Emily Bennett Xiangling. But yeah, overall, extremely strong, not ubiquitous enough to go in tier 0, but definitely. And I count characters as sort of at the medium of between their free-to-play weapon, 4-star weapon, and their 5-star weapon, especially since 5-star weapons, I think, are more accessible nowadays. And Emily's 5-star weapon is very strong. If you only have her free-to-play weapon and you're never considering getting her 5-star, that probably pulls her down a little bit. I don't know exactly to where. I personally I haven't even raised my 5-star weapon fully, so I say this only having actually played her with like Jadewing Spear, but her signature makes her even better. Next we'll do Keqing. Keqing is a tough one, because obviously in her kit she doesn't have like anything that crazy going on, but having access to the scroll set does just make her buffing be crazy good. You can kind of just, she can be a replacement to Emily on those monopyro teams that I mentioned and do really well. She can go on Novelette teams, Mualani teams. She does respectable off damage. She makes a good double Geo core with Chiori. I would say none of her stuff is strong enough to really warrant her being in tier 1 or tier 0, but I definitely think just the scroll set alone is so powerful that she at least belongs in tier 1.5. Like, if any of these characters could fully use the scroll set, they would also be in tier 1.5. It could be that as more and more characters come out that can use the scroll set, that her value gets pushed down and that she goes down to tier 2. She does all right damage if you actually build her for damage and you have her C6, which I don't expect many people do, but maybe eventually people will get C6. But I think it's only fair to rank her with like the potential that she will have, especially given that her no investment potential is so high. So all things considered, I'm going to put her just towards the bottom of tier 1.5. Things will get shifted around though, so we'll wait a little bit before we like settle on a final placement, but it's going to be in tier 1.5. Now Mualani. On release, I would have put Mualani around here. At release, I thought Mualani was very, very strong and definitely one of the better DPSs. I didn't think she was as good as Novelette, but I did think that she was as good as Arlecchino, albeit in different ways. Arlecchino being a bit more consistent, and Mualani having high peak potential damage. After Xilonen came out though, Mualani got a huge boost. And as such, I now consider Mualani to be easily the second best DPS. I don't think I would consider her quite as good as Novelette, just because of Novelette's ease of use, his AoE potential, and just the overall consistency. Mualani has higher peaks than Novelette, where she is better, but Novelette is more consistent overall. And when I rank a power rankings tier list like this, I value that consistency a little bit more than just peak potential. If we're talking absolute peak potential, then Mualani honestly does go higher than Novelette, but that's never been Novelette's strength. It's his consistency that really makes him shine above the others, but I do think it is reasonably close now. And I think that I would, depending on the day, depending on the abyss, then I would say Mualani could be better. Kinich. I think that Kinich, well, he didn't get buffed by Xilonen, and I think that Kinich is right around the other DPSs. Like I said when I made my other list, everyone from Linny all the way to Clorand, I consider them basically equal and basically interchangeable. And I don't really consider any of these characters personally to me above any of the other characters. It just depends on who fits your playstyle, who is better in that specific content, what other teammates you have or what have you, what you value, whether you value AoE or consistency or peak damage or all of the or all of these have different pros and cons, and I would consider Kinich to be on the same level as all of these other ones. So that's where I consider Kinich. I think with the release of Mawika, I consider... Hi, Violet. Love you. Love you, Violet. You can't come in right now. I'm recording a video. Not right now, Violet. I love you. I'm doing a video. I'm working. Kinich has really good single target damage. He has a little bit worse AoE. He has a bit more restrictive team comps. And like I said, I do expect Mawika to come in, and with whatever she does, I expect that to buff him a pretty decent bit, I think. The Emily teams with Kinich feel a lot better than the non-Emily teams in general. There's some teams like Farina stuff. He's pretty darn tied to Xiangling. I mean, other stuff works. He's still good. He's still good enough to pull up those other characters, but he just doesn't have that like total X factor of raw damage that especially Novelet and Mualani have. And then finally, Xilonen. Xilonen, I consider her to be the second best character in the game behind Farina. What she does is amazing. She's a huge buff to almost every Geo character that does damage. She's a buff to units that didn't work that well with animal units, such as Mualani, that the buffs they were preferred longer lasting buffs. And she's an especially big buff to characters who don't work with attack scalers like Bennett. She's a big buff to Yelan teams. She opens up so many more Farina teams. And as we kind of figured, she's basically Kazuha, but with more quality of life. It's easier in general to maximize her buffs with most of the teams than it is for Kazuha, generally speaking. The buffs last longer and they last through multiple waves. And she heals. In exchange, you lose the grouping and some damage. And to me, this is just a worthy trade. So that's where I put Xilonen. Now for the spicy part. How do these placements affect the other characters? Because there's a lot of things that I'm going to be changing and shifting now that we've got the new characters onto the list. I think we'll do this by going down and working our way back up. So first of all, Ningguang. Xilonen makes Ningguang a lot better. I'm going to move her all the way up into tier 2. Ningguang actually feels like she does damage. She can comfortably 36 star. I found the best results from the Farina Yelan Xilonen teams, but you can replace Yelan with Bennett and get more damage off your Ningguang, and she actually feels reasonably good. So Ningguang she's actually pretty solid now. I'm happy about it. The next one is Xinyan. I'm going to move up Xinyan just a little bit. I feel like she works decently well with Mualani. And although it's not like the craziest synergy and that, all of a sudden Xinyan is great now, she's definitely got some good synergy there. And I think it brings her up to tier 2. You can also do those weird physical stuff. You can do plunge stuff, everything added together. I think she's a tier 2 character now. I think yoimiya is a little bit more usable. I don't think it moves her up an entire tier, but I'm moving her up a few placements. It feels better. Teams feel better. Not sure exactly where I place her. It's kind of a wash, like where do you place someone in tier 2, but I feel like she's a bit more in the higher end of tier 2 than in the lower end now. I liked the Xilonen team better. I felt like it was a pretty good upgrade for yoimiya. Like, I think she's around Ningguang. I think that kind of feels right to me. I don't know if I put Keqing above or below. I don't know. It's hard. When they're that close, it's really tricky. Mona, I do believe, belongs in a solid tier 1.5 now. I don't think she's like absolutely cracked or anything, but I like Mona quite a bit as a support. It used to be that supports carried DPSs. Nowadays, there's DPSs that are so good that they can kind of carry supports, because of support, even if they don't have the craziest buffing in the world, if a DPS has tons of multipliers and good that can take advantage of it, that really makes a difference. So Mualani, Arlecchino, Clorant have high enough multipliers that they can take advantage of what Mona can bring to the table. And I think it makes Mona like quite a bit better of a character personally. I think some people might still disagree with this placement because it's not like she's best in slot with Mualani, best in slot with Arlecchino, best in slot with, you know, Clorinde or Navia or whatever. But I think that especially if you consider C1 Mona, which I do consider to be very achievable for anyone now that we have the 5-star selector guaranteed for every single year. I think C1 is very realistic. I think the amount that she has synergized with Mualani and Arlecchino, who are two of the best DPSs in the game, I think warrant this placement. Not any higher for sure. Maybe I'm overrating her a little bit, but that's where I think she goes. She feels strong. Very similarly, Candace is feeling better and better. Not only, again, does she work really well with Arlecchino, with Arlecchino, but she works really, really well with Mualani. And now with Xilonen, Candace can also utilize the Archaic Petra artifact set. And so in addition to the normal attack bonus, she also buffs hydro damage. I don't know, I wouldn't really say one of them is better than the other. I like them both quite a bit. I think technically Candace has higher potential, especially with Mualani, so I'm going to put her a bit higher. And that's pretty sick that a really awful unit who only had a niche use with Nilou at C6 now has a great use even at C0 with Mualani, and then at C6 with Arlecchino too. So Pog for Candace, very good. I'm going to move Dea up a little bit just because she has great synergy, like not great synergy, but solid synergy with Mualani and Kinich and Linny and Arlecchino and Novelette. It's not the best in slot, but I'm just going to move her up just because I find her so comfy and such a nice pull, just like a nice unit to have. But yeah, not enough to bring her up an entire tier or anything. She's not absolutely indispensable, but I think if her interruption resistance lasted longer, I really would put her in tier 1.5, or if she actually healed your active character, so she could synergize with Farina or something. There's like a few things that would make Dea higher, but I think as she is, she's one of the few sources of off-field power application, which is just so important for Mualani, and it's good, decent synergy with Arlecchino. It's good. She's decent synergy with Clorinde, with Kinich, with Novelette. That's like a lot of really high value characters and Linny that can use Dea. So yeah, I think Dea is solid. Now for some demotions, I'm going to demote Venti down to tier 2. I just feel like it's getting worse and worse with Venti. It's just kind of like, unless you, like, we're talking power rankings, right? So is he useful for Imaginarium Theater? Sure. Is he useful for some floor 11? Sure. You don't even have to play floor 9 and 10 anymore. So he's not good for like lower floors of the Abyss anymore. You don't even really want to use him in a lot of domains anymore. I feel like there's almost no reason to get Venti. I almost feel like Genshin needs to like remake Venti as like, I don't know if they just scrap the old character or if they buff him or if they make a new version of Venti. Like sometimes gacha games do that. They make a new version of a character. I feel like they got to do that with him. He's just not it anymore. I would never recommend someone pull Venti. For pull value, he's like even worse. But for power, I'm not sure. Like he still has Viridescent Venerer. He still has great grouping. It's just, I don't know. I would never recommend someone get a Venti. And I don't think that he's very valuable to an account. So sorry to Venti lovers, but I think he's just getting worse and worse. I might even put him lower than this. I don't know. I think he's worse than Dea. I'd love to hear a counter argument, but I just don't think so. I'm gonna demote Sigewinne. I know I am a Sigewinne stan. Apparently, like I called people out for underrating her. I'm basically you'll see she's not the only casualty that I'm demoting for this reason. And you'll know what I mean when I say it, but I think with Xilonen, the standard for healers has risen. You only need 2 healers on your account, essentially. You know, one for either side, and you're also competing against shielders, you know, and I just think that the amount of teams that she works on is just very low. So I think any team that she could have worked on, like basically her best team was Mono Hydro, and now Xilonen is way better on Mono Hydro. So Sigewinne she lost her only niche. She lost her only niche, basically. So that's why I'm putting her down. Not putting her down, I'm moving her down. Yeah. Yanfei. I think that I just sort of underrated Yanfei because I was testing her with Xilonen, and then I went back to just Farina, Yelan, Bennett, and I was just like, this team kind of cracked. Yanfei is kind of good. She vapes in AoE. And I love Farina, Yelan, Bennett with Yanfei as the DPS. I think it's really strong, and the fact that she has a shield, you can't always use it. Like sometimes you don't have enough ER. But yeah, she works great. The Mari Shisei Hunter artifact set on Farina teams. She vapes in AoE. She has solid personal numbers. Especially, I raised her normal to level 9 and fully ascended her. And she just does like really good damage. And she's very comfy. She's like yoimiya, but she does damage in she does similar single target damage. Like worse, but similar single target. Especially since both of their multipliers aren't like the peak. So they rely on Farina and Yelan to also do a lot of damage. But Yanfei has built-in interruption resistance with her shield, and she can vape in AoE. So overall, I think she's just quite a bit better than yoimiya, and that puts her in tier 1.5 to me. Next promotion is Noelle. She is a lot better than she was. I think Noelle was like pretty solid before, and with Xilonen, the team actually sings. It actually feels complete. She does good damage. She synergizes with the rest of the team. It's awesome. And she's very comfy. Ito, same thing, much better. I don't think it's like a total game changer where he's like one of the good DPSs or like the great DPSs, whatever you want to call these guys. But I do think that he's out of the basement with this team. The team does good damage. It's very similar to, you know, the damage that the Raiden version does. I really don't hate myself playing Ito team anymore. It's just more damage. I don't know what to say. You have much stronger sub DPSs. It's great. I think I'm just gonna slightly adjust things. I think I'm not gonna like change a ton of these characters' tier placements, but I'm just gonna adjust where in the tier I think different characters go. I think some characters just got like little demotions or little adjustments, and it's not too big of a deal as to where the characters are to me in a tier as much as it is what tier they're in. But there's some I feel like a little bit lower, like Kirara and Yao Yao. I feel like there's less and less reasons to use them and use aggravate. They're still good in Nilou, they're still good in aggravate, there's some other stuff, but I feel like, you know, they're going down in value a bit. I feel like Cryo is going down, Aido is going down, Chiori is going down, trending down, Yai is trending down a little bit. It's not like it's like a whole major shift where they're terrible now. It's just not as good as they were. You know, I think the plunge teams are really good. I think Jean, you know, is trending down a little bit, but it's not like a crazy amount. And now let's do some more promotions. We're gonna promote Sucrose up to tier 1. I think one of the teams that I underrated was Animo teams with Mualani. If you don't use Shilonen's burst, you can save some Hydro Aura, and that allows you to get a swirl. I was kind of just tunnel visioned on always using Shilonen's skill and burst, but if you want to maximize damage, you can do Mualani, Sucrose, Xilonen, Xiangling, and then you can just do your skill with Xilonen and then swirl with Sucrose, and then not burst with Xilonen, or you can burst after. That way you get a crystallize, and then you get the swirl as well, and then that allows you to get more VV uptime, and you get double VV, plus the EM sharing from Sucrose is very valuable. So Sucrose moves up. I also think that Sucrose Arlecchino is quite good. So yeah, I think Sucrose deserves to move up. If you want to move her all the way up to here, I also would be down. I could preemptively do this, but I think I'm just going to leave her here for now. To me, this is like one placement off, right? All of these DPSs to me are in the same placement. That's how I feel. I'm going to demote Kokomi. I feel like now you just pull Kokomi for like just for Nilou. Like if you want to run mono hydro, now it's just Xilonen is just so much better. So I feel like I've always felt that Kokomi was a bit lower on the pull value, and now we have a healer that heals more from off field and just does a lot more. She just does a frankly absurd amount. Kokomi's value contribution to the team is just so much lower, and I do feel like it is 2 tiers lower, right? Not 1 tier lower, because I feel just adding a bit of hydro application AoE isn't enough utility anymore, especially since teams just need more than that these days. That's all. Similarly, Baiju, I still think Baiju is a good character, but not a tier 1 character, I don't think. I think he adds more than Kokomi does. I think I'm going to leave him at the top of tier 1.5. But yeah, just the standard for healers. I feel like Shen Yun and Chevreuse are tier 1 healers, which with the amount of what they provide. And I think that Bennett and Xilonen are tier 0 healers in what they provide. Tier 0 healers provide so much that they could not provide healing and basically be in the same place on the tier list. Like, yeah, obviously it's fantastic that Bennett heals and it makes him so much better, but like he would still be tier 0. Maybe he would be tier 1 if he wasn't a healer, but pretty much tier 0. And same with Xilonen. They would still be incredible characters if they didn't heal. And I feel like if Baizhu and Kokomi didn't heal, they would just be terrible, frankly. If Shenyun didn't heal, she would be not that great, but still have some use. And Chevreuse, if she didn't heal, she would still be great. So that's kind of how, like, that's one way that I judge healers. So I'm pretty confident in this new placement. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna move Jean a little bit up, because I feel like she still does a little bit more, especially since C2 Jean is a little bit more achievable. But yeah. I'm going to move Xingqiu down. I feel like Xingqiu is still really good, but so often nowadays, the personal damage from Yulan and the buffing is so much more impactful. There's better buffers to give Yulan more damage, and there's better DPSs that get more out of her buff. So the tandem of those two things widens the gap between her and Xingqiu. So Xingqiu goes down. Still, I still think he belongs in tier 1. I still think he's excellent. He's just not as excellent as he once was. I pretty much don't want to change most of the DPSs, except that now I think that Navia is the best out of all of these DPSs. I think that Navia is, I think all of these DPSs are pretty much tied, and even these other characters, I have them in the middle just because I think that they belong kind of in there. I think I'm going to move Xiangling up. I know there's kind of there's like a double trend with Xiangling, because on one hand, she's more and more ubiquitous, like more and more teams need her. And at the same time, her flaws are really, really showing in that she needs so much ER when she's not using Bennett. She doesn't do very much damage. She's super annoying to use. Her rotation, she kind of extends a bunch of rotations. She's really annoying, but she's still so necessary for a lot of really top characters. And yeah, just to explain Navia even more, not only is she super easy to play, but Xilonen is a noticeable buff to her that makes her feel like a step above all the other DPSs. So, you know, Hu Tao got a bit better from Xilonen. Raiden got a bit better from Xilonen. But I think by and large, you know, roughly where all these characters go is pretty much the same. I think if you don't have C6 Chevreuse, which a lot of people don't, then maybe Clorinde does belong down here. Especially if you don't have her 5-star weapon, maybe she belongs down here. I think if you have either C6 Chevreuse or her 5-star weapon, she, depending on what you value, she could be somewhere. So she's a bit more dependent on other stuff, whereas someone like Alhaitham, if you're strictly free to play, then he feels a lot better than Clorinde. Hu Tao, if you really max out her cancels, especially if you're willing to get her C1, Hu Tao could be higher. You know, Raiden, if you really value the interruption resistance, if you really min-max your support's damage, like if you really build good damage on Yulan and Farina, then Raiden's value can rise, because she adds, you know, reducing the energy requirements is more valuable when your Yulan and Farina are really well built, especially on Xilonen teams. So and Nilou, if you have the key, if you're in AoE scenarios, her value can really increase. And then Linny, if you're willing to be cringe, if you're willing to like enjoy his playstyle, if you just min-max him, then he can perform, you know, the best. So all of these guys have a claim to fame. I don't think any of them are strictly better than the others. And then yeah, Clorinde, it's her multi-wave potential and it's her AoE and her mobility around the battlefield that give her an edge. So again, depends on who you value. Also, a lot of her best teams do include shielders, C6 Chevreuse with Toma, or Aggravate with Kirara. Yeah, okay. Clorinde, and then I'm going to just a couple more. Yulan got a buff, but I'm still going to demote her. And that is because I think I overrated her a little bit when I made my last tier list, but now she is like a core to so many teams that basically function because of how well Xilonen, Farina, and Yulan work together, and those teams are some of the best. So she's still definitely a tier 0 character. I just think that I personally overrated her in the last video, and now we're sort of correcting her, and I think this is the correct placement now. I'm going to demote one more character, and that's going to be Arlecchino. I just don't think she is quite enough above the other DPSs, especially above Navia, that I think she truly belongs in tier 0. I'm also going to demote Zhongli right here, I think. I think he's still very, very comfy and very, very powerful and very, very unique, but I don't think I mean, he got kicked out of his best team with Novelette. He got kicked out of Mualani teams. He got kicked out of Arlecchino teams, unless you just want comfort. I mean, he got kicked out of Navia teams. He's still going to be used, especially this current Abyss. You're still going to use him. I think he's still going to have pretty high usage rates, but I feel like his power has just gone down. I feel like he's just less valuable and less powerful than he used to be. And then I feel like Nahida, I'm going to put her below Bennett. I think this is, I kind of rearranged the top. I just think that Novelette and Mualani just are so powerful and they pull up their teams so much. I think they pull up their teams more than Kazuha pulls up his teams. If grouping was more ubiquitous, I would put him, you know, he could be more in the top 3, but I just feel like we haven't needed as much grouping recently. And by recently, I mean for like the past like year and a half, unless it's like a Kazuha Abyss, grouping is not necessary and often not useful. And more, the short buff up time is an annoyance, but mostly it's just the lack of grouping. And I think, again, I'm still putting him in tier 0. I still think he's insane, but I still think these other characters kind of outdo him just a little bit. And Nahida, like, Dendro teams are still good. Alhaitham, Double Hydro Dendro, Nilou, they're still very good, but they're not the peak teams anymore, especially with Emily coming out, and a lot of the best Dendro teams are with Burning now, and then so with Arlecchino or with Kinich are going to be using Burning. Nahida is still absolutely irreplaceable for Hyper Bloom, Alhaitham Spread, or Nilou, but those teams haven't received a buff in quite a while, and lots of teams have passed them in terms of power. And the final one, I guess I want to re-justify why I consider Furina to be the best character in the game, because obviously we do have Xilonen here that definitely makes a case to be the best unit in the game. And I think that there's 2 top teams that don't use Furina, and those are Mualani and Arlecchino. Although Mualani is better with Furina, it's just that the vapes become even more inconsistent. But Novelette being, I think, the best DPS in the game, and it's a significant downgrade not using Furina on that team. Navia's significant downgrade. I do think it's pretty close. If you wanted to say that Xilonen was better than Furina, I think that's fair enough. I just think that Furina she requires a healer, but you have Xilonen, you have Bennett, you have Shanyun, you have Jean. You don't need a team-wide healer to do Furina. Even if you're only getting, like with Bennett and or Xilonen single target healers, yeah, sometimes you may only give 60 damage bonus instead of 70. Sometimes you may only give 50 or 40. This is still a very, very high damage bonus, and she still does as much off-field damage as Yelan. And if her application, if you don't need too high of application to enable a vape, then you can build her normally. And if you would need too much application to vape, you can build her to vape, and then she does huge vaping damage. So I think that between the buffing she gives and the fact that you run a healer, or you can run a healer on almost any team seamlessly, especially now that we have Xilonen, then that's why Furina to me is still the best character in the game. If Xilonen was as good as she is and didn't work with Furina, then I might say that Xilonen is the best character in the game. But the thing is, Xilonen sort of buffed Furina. She made Furina even better. And I just think that Furina is still a little bit more meta-defining and a little bit more impactful. And the reality is, it'd be really interesting to do a tier list if you didn't have the meta characters, because basically a lot of characters in tier 1.5 or lower are absolutely requiring a lot of the top characters to make them work. And that's, I think, one of the hallmarks of tier 1 is that they sort of work well with a variety of things and don't require certain things to work, whereas tier 1.5 does require either specific setups or specific other characters to buff them. So that is it. That is the final tier list. If you want a nice clip of the screenshot, again, go check out Tactor. If you want to hear my reasoning for all the other characters and where they are on the list, check out my original tier list right there. Let me know how wrong I am about everything I've placed here. Take care. Bye for now.